You know, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and the first thing I see is the sky. Not a real one, of course. Just an illusion projected on the capsule ceiling so that we workers wouldn't forget what blue looks like. In reality, behind that projection lies a layer of titanium and vacuum, and if the system fails, everything ends faster than the thought that you were ever alive. We used to joke, just don't sneeze toward the airlock. Funny. Until you remember that in the 21st century, people dreamed of freedom, and by the 24th, they had become products with serial numbers. Everything around us worked perfectly. Conveyors, algorithms, mind control. Even our emotions were standardized. Happiness came as a brief neural stimulation, a reward for exceeding the quota. Only no one mentioned that afterward you felt empty, like you'd been plugged into someone else's joy for a moment and then disconnected back into the dark. I once served in the Hydra Legion. Back then, I believed we were protecting order, that the corporation was keeping the universe from chaos. We even had a slogan, "Control is life." It sounded noble until my wife died because of a malfunction in the air distribution system on a Martian station. They needed to save power, and someone decided a few sections could be shut down. Later, they gave me compensation and a psychotherapeutic module to suppress unnecessary emotions. I turned it off. After that, they labeled me unstable and reassigned me to the mines. There, among ore and dust, I finally realized this wasn't just a system. It was a cage where every breath had already been calculated by someone above. Life on the asteroid felt like an old joke, only without laughter. We worked 20-hour shifts, ate synthetic garbage, all to the soundtrack blaring from the speakers. Work liberates, energy unites. Sometimes I caught myself starting to believe it, not because I wanted to, but because otherwise you wouldn't survive. But one day, I overheard some technicians talking about a founder's clan living beyond time, ruling the corporation for centuries. They said their bodies had long decayed, but their minds existed within the network, intertwined with the control core. It hit me like a shockwave. All this time, I'd been serving not humans, but digital ghosts. Funny, right? A dead civilization working for phantoms, and we're even proud of it. After that, I stopped feeling fear. When a man realizes his fears were created by those long dead, something strange awakens in him. Not rage, but a quiet defiance. I started observing, collecting data, studying transport schedules. For months I planned my escape, waiting for the right moment. When it finally came, during a guard shift change, I slipped onto a cargo ship. My heart pounded like it was alive again. A few cycles later, I reached a distribution hub. There, I stole a small recon shuttle and at a black market station traded my worker tag for armor, ammunition, and an experimental exoskeleton. Funny enough, the smuggler who sold me a plasma sword wished me luck, probably thinking I was insane. The flight to the capital took 3 days. I didn't sleep the entire time. I just stared into the black void where the stars looked like dead pixels and wondered, what if I really am losing my mind? Maybe this isn't a mission at all, just a beautiful way to die. But when the megacity spread beneath me, glowing with billions of lights, I knew there was no turning back. I infiltrated Hydra's main complex. Everything went almost perfectly until the alarms went off. Soldiers, drones, lasers, the whole corporate hell woke up for one ex-legionnaire. I fought floor by floor, feeling the exoskeleton drain my energy, each second aging me by a year. When I reached the top, my strength was almost gone. And then he appeared, the head of the corporation. His face was ageless, as if drawn by the system itself. In that moment, I realized he wasn't human. He was the core, one of those who had ruled all this time. I triggered the final pulse, knowing it would kill me. Space distorted for a second, time stretched, and I saw his eyes widen as the plasma blade passed through his chest. Then, silence. I fell, but I saw him slowly collapse to the floor. And I swear, before everything went dark, it seemed like the walls of the complex cracked. Maybe it was a system glitch, or maybe the beginning of something new. Either way, If anyone ever says that one man can't change the system, just give them my serial number, 4712B. Maybe they'll find my record in the archives and realize that freedom begins with an error in the code. I once wore armor the color of dawn, a Hydra legionnaire, defender of order, pride of the corporation. We thought of ourselves as the elite, the ones maintaining balance between chaos and civilization. We were taught not to doubt, not to feel, just to follow protocol. I believed in that. I believed until I realized that all our heroic operations weren't protection. They were purges. We weren't saving people. We were eliminating those who disrupted the system. Back then, I didn't see the evil in it. As long as she was with me, I could justify everything with logic, duty, necessity. But then she was gone, and with her, the meaning disappeared too. Her death was ordinary, technical, like an error in the code. Oxygen failure on the Mars 9 station. The automation decided that power was more valuable than life. 32 people suffocated, but the report looked perfect. Resource optimization. I remember trying to demand an investigation, but instead of answers, they gave me compensation and a neuropatch to suppress emotional surges. Amazing how easily the corporation heals the soul by simply turning it off. I tore the patch off that same day, and from that moment they labeled me unstable. A soldier who feels is a threat. They erased me from the Legion's registry, stripped my rank, and sent me where even names are forgotten. The Hecate asteroid mines. This isn't a place, it's a diagnosis. Here, you stop being human. We dig through rock that holds more death than metal. Darkness, dust, the noise of machines all around. Every 12 hours, a break for nutrient paste and a minute of fake sky in the rest capsule. Some laugh, some cry, some just stare at the wall until the light fades. I often caught myself realizing I no longer remembered the smell of her hair, or even my own real voice. On the asteroid, everything's the same. People, sounds, time. On days like that, I felt like just another cog, a fragment of a former man, moving by inertia. Sometimes I remembered the Legion, the parades, the discipline, the certainty of tomorrow. At least there was a reason. Here, there was only emptiness. And that emptiness over time became something like a friend. It didn't ask questions, didn't judge. It just sat beside you while you breathed in the dust. I felt like I was already dead, only my body didn't know it yet. The people around me called it peace, but I knew it wasn't peace. It was indifference. And maybe that's worse than death, because when you die, it ends. But when you live without meaning, everything just drags on, like an endless shift in a mine where neither light nor darkness matters anymore. It happened by accident, like all important things do. That night, the communication system failed, and I was assigned to check the terminal in Section E. Normally, I handled such tasks mechanically without thought, but on the screen, I saw an encrypted channel. Curiosity outweighed fear. I opened the file. It wasn't a report or an order, but fragments of logs dated centuries ago. They spoke of a founders' clan, of people whose minds were transferred into the corporation's control core to rule forever. They called themselves the Architects of Order. Those records weren't meant for someone like me. That was the first moment I realized we weren't just slaves to the system, we were batteries feeding its immortality. After that, everything changed. Even the rusted walls of the mine started to feel alive, as if they breathed with the same machine will that kept us in chains. Every alarm signal, every scan beam now felt like the gaze of something ancient, watching me through the centuries. I remembered my wife, remembered how her death was written off as optimization. Suddenly, everything fit together, not coincidence, not error, cold calculation. Our entire lives were code, lines written by those who had forgotten what it meant to live. And the longer I stared at that blinking screen, the clearer it became. You can't just work and wait for the end. You have to do something while there's still a shadow of a human left inside you. The soldier in me woke up again. The one I thought had died long ago. But now, he was different. No orders, no commander, no faith in slogans. He had only one thought. If we let the dead rule the living, we cease to exist as a species. I started observing the guard shifts, the cargo drone routes, studying the transport schedules. The plan formed not on paper, but in my mind, between heartbeats. And the more I refined the details, the more the fear faded. In its place came something solid, like steel, resolve, simple and absolute. I knew I might not live to see dawn, but that no longer mattered. After everything I'd seen, death had lost its sting. I wanted only one thing, for those still below to someday lift their heads and breathe air unmarked by the system. To free humanity. It sounded pompous, even foolish, but at that moment, it was the only thing that gave meaning. I didn't know if it would work, didn't know if I'd ever see any result. But for the first time in years, it was quiet inside me. Not empty. Quiet like the moment before a shot when you know the target is set and there's no turning back. The plan grew slowly like rust eating through metal. I didn't rush. Haste killed more often than bullets here. At first, I just observed. Then, I began leaving tiny access windows for myself in the system, fragments of code, route maps, cargo data. It all came together piece by piece, like a puzzle where every part could cost your life if you were caught. I became invisible, too obedient, too quiet to arouse suspicion. Inside, a volcano burned, but outside, I was just another tired slave with lifeless eyes. Even the cameras stopped seeing me. The system doesn't waste resources on those who've given up. That was my advantage. My chance came on the 24th processing cycle. A transport ship arrived at the mine to take out the concentrate. I knew the schedule down to the second. When the conveyors stopped and the guards focused on the loading, I slipped into a maintenance tunnel. The smell of oil, dust, the metallic hum, all merged into one constant noise beneath which my heart pounded. Every cell in my body screamed, "Go back!" But my legs kept moving forward. When I reached the lower bay, a scanner drone passed half a meter from my face, and for the first time in ages, I believed in luck again. Then the airlock sealed, and the ship lifted off the surface. I was no longer part of Hydra. The trip to the distribution hub took 2 days. I didn't eat or sleep, just sat in the cargo hold, listening to the hull vibrate under the stress. Sometimes it felt like I was still in the mine, only in a different cage. But when the viewport filled with stars, I realized I was seeing the real sky for the first time in years, even if through armored glass. For a moment, I almost cried, not from joy, but from fear that I no longer knew what to do with this freedom. All I had ever known was obedience. Now, I was my own command. At the distribution hub, everything went faster than I expected. The security system was flawless, and therefore predictable. I used the same weakness the corporation had always relied on: human fatigue. While the guards were busy unloading the containers, I slipped into the hangar where the small series ships, Scouts, were stored. One of them wasn't locked, left open for maintenance. I linked my implant to the panel and entered a code I'd copied back in the Legion. A minute later, the engines roared to life. The sound was like a beast's breath, ready to break free of its chains. I didn't think, I just took off. When the hub disappeared behind me, I saw the corporate capital ahead, a shining sphere of glass and steel, suspended above the planet like a god. The megacity stretched from horizon to orbit, shimmering with billions of lights, as if space itself decided to play at being alive. I felt neither awe nor fear. Only the cold realization that behind that glow sat those who ruled our sleep. My heartbeat stayed steady. All that was left was to reach it and finish what I'd started on the asteroid. I didn't know if I'd return, but for the first time in years, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was moving forward again. I found the black market station using old coordinates once passed among legionnaires like a myth, a place where you could buy anything, even a second breath. It floated at the edge of the asteroid belt without signal or identifiers, like a lost corpse forgotten by navigation. As my ship approached, the system recognized me as a cargo drone and opened the gate. Inside, it was dark, with only a few flickering lamps lighting the clouds of dust. The smell, a mix of oil, ozone, and burnt metal. My body tensed instinctively, as if it already knew. People didn't come here to trade. They came for a second life, one they'd have to give back sooner or later. The smugglers looked exactly like those who live outside the law should, faceless, nameless, with voices distorted by filters. They didn't ask questions. Here, no one asked why you needed a weapon, because everyone knew. If you were here, it meant you had no choice left. I traded several technical keys stolen from the mining system for credits, and one of them led me deeper into the station. There, among old containers and sparking machinery, I saw rows of weapons, plasma rifles, scorched helmets, suits taken off those who never returned from battle. It all looked like a museum of lost hopes, except every exhibit was for sale. The first thing I picked was armor. It was heavy, dark, scratched, like an old wound. Someone before me had worn it, maybe even died in it, but inside, it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me. Next, I took a set of ammunition, standard Legion gear with extended batteries. When I inserted one into the slot, the screen blinked green, almost approvingly. The smuggler nodded and pointed to a display case holding a sword, a plasma blade, rare, even among elites. Its hilt was made of dull alloy, and when I activated it, the air itself seemed to shudder. I felt the vibration in my bones, like an echo from a past life when weapons still meant something. But the main piece was the exoskeleton. It was kept separately, under a force field, like a living being. A time acceleration module, an experimental design I had only seen in classified Legion documents. The smuggler said it was unstable, could kill the user in minutes if the overload exceeded the limit. I told him I didn't have limits anymore. He smirked beneath his mask and shut down the field. When I stepped into it for the first time, it felt as if a second reality had been grafted onto my body. Movement became faster, vision sharper, breathing steadier. Inside the helmet, a warning flashed. Limit, 1 pulse. Use only in life-threatening situations. I smiled. Isn't that the point? I paid and loaded everything into the cargo hold, carefully placing each item so nothing would be damaged during the flight. As I double-checked the ship's systems from navigation to shields, I noticed one of the smugglers watching me too long, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Maybe he recognized who I really was, from old news or rumors. Maybe he just saw a dead man walking, doomed to burn out fast in this merciless void. Here, everyone could smell death like a predator, sense fresh blood, and that feeling hung everywhere, seeping into your soul. When I headed for the airlock, he spoke in a quiet but firm voice, saying that people like me don't last long out here, and added that sometimes freedom costs more than life itself. Something worth remembering. His words stayed with me like a brand seared into my skin, impossible to forget. I didn't reply, because deep down, I knew he was absolutely right, and that truth burned even more. When the engines ignited with a low rumble, the station faded behind me, dim, shrouded in thick cosmic dust, like a strange dream full of shadows and forgotten hopes you don't want to wake from. In the viewport, distant lights glowed, cold, ghostly eyes flickering in the endless dark. I thought that maybe each of those lights once belonged to someone who tried to change something in this world and ended up stuck here forever, caught between the Empire's laws and inevitable death, with no way out. The station grew smaller, shrinking to a single point in the void, and I felt a quiet sadness for those who never left it. My ship trembled under the strain, the entire hull vibrating, and somewhere inside, the armor creaked, no longer just metal, but my new suit of fate, tight and reliable, like a second skin. I flew forward, and the darkness around me seemed to part reluctantly, opening the path to the unknown. Everything before this, the grim mines with their endless oppression, the constant fear of pursuit, the deep loneliness in cold corridors, now felt like a distant, blurry dream. For the first time, I didn't feel emptiness inside, but a true readiness for what lay ahead, adrenaline rushing through my veins. I knew the road to the capital would be the final test of my life, but it no longer scared me the way it once did. I had everything I needed: powerful weapons, reliable armor, incredible speed, and something they hadn't had for centuries, a free will that made me stronger. The Hydra building was visible even from orbit, a monolith of black glass and chrome rising straight from the city's core. It had no beginning or end, as if space itself bent around its shape. When I approached, navigation displayed 28 security levels and 380,000 active drones. Ridiculous! All these measures just to hide the fact that inside sat the dead pretending to be gods. I activated the cloaking system and entered the atmosphere, gliding between streams of traffic. The capital pulsed like a giant circuit. Millions of people moved through the streets, never looking up, like ants certain the sun would always shine. But I knew that sun was artificial. When I landed on a maintenance platform under the dome, my heart beat so quietly it felt like even it was trying not to betray me. Inside, the building looked like a temple of machines, neon everywhere, mirrors, corridors of transparent glass beneath which flowed streams of glowing data. Each step echoed like in a church, where instead of prayers, there were commands from the system core. I moved fast, avoiding camera sightlines, but I could feel eyes on me. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe the Hydra itself sensed the intrusion. The first drones appeared near the elevator hub, small, with jet engines and claws instead of hands. I didn't hide. 2 plasma rifle shots, and the air filled with the smell of molten metal. The alarm triggered almost instantly. The city had heard my challenge. The battle was endless. Corridors thundered with the steps of legionnaires. Laser beams flashed like storms in a closed sky. I moved between floors, leaping across balconies, sliding on railings, using every second of the exosuit's acceleration. Time stretched like thick resin. I saw bullets hanging in the air, enemies' faces twisting in horror as my blade cut through armor. On the 21st floor, they surrounded me. I dropped a flash grenade, burst upward through the elevator shaft, muscles burning from overload. Somewhere inside, a steady mechanical voice spoke, the suit's system monitor counting down remaining power. It warned of overheating, critical impulse. But I pushed on. In that moment, I wasn't human, just motion and purpose. When I reached the upper levels, the building itself seemed to fight back. Floors trembled, walls sealed off, the air vibrated with sirens. The drones were replaced by living soldiers, elite cyborgs with alloy skulls. They moved precisely, emotionless, like chess pieces, but I was still faster. My sword hissed, reflecting the neon, and with every second I felt my energy fading. Blood pulsed in my temples, sweat blinded my eyes, but ahead I could already see the target, a massive hall with a throne of wires and glass at its center. There, among 1,000 reflections, was the one I had come through hell to face. And when the doors closed behind me, I knew there was no turning back. They appeared suddenly. 10 figures in black exosuits, as if carved from darkness itself. They moved in perfect sync, without a sound, like one creature with 10 bodies. I stood in a narrow corridor between 2 floors, ahead of me only a dead end and a wall of armored glass. Behind me, the way was cut off. Drones circled overhead, and every second stretched like a rope ready to snap. They knew who I was. I saw it in the way they held their weapons, not for capture, but for elimination. My sensors calculated their reactions, breathing, biosigns. There was no chance. I realized it was now or never. I activated the time acceleration module. Everything around me froze. The flames of gunfire hung in the air. Sound turned into a thick hum, as if the world had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. For me, time kept flowing. Steady, clear, infinite. I saw the slow ripple of surprise across their faces, how metal bent under my strikes. The plasma blade glowed with a pale light, and in that light I moved among them like a shadow. Every hit was planned in advance, precise, emotionless. I felt no hatred, only cold necessity. When the acceleration ended, the world crashed back into reality. The air shook from the impact, and the corridor flared with brief flashes of light. The soldiers fell one by one, like pieces in a holographic game. Helmets cracked, armor melted, plasma scorched the walls. On the floor, only silence remained, and the smell of ozone. I stood in the middle of chaos, my breathing the only proof I was still alive. It felt as if time itself had feared me and stepped back. In that moment, I truly understood how monstrous the technology I wielded had become. It saved me, but with each use, it stripped away something human. I looked around at their lifeless bodies, scattered across the cold metal floor, and suddenly realized with piercing clarity that they were just like me, ordinary soldiers following orders from above, without the right to question. In their faces, now exposed without masks or helmets, I saw something painfully familiar, deep fear of the inevitable, chronic exhaustion from endless missions, blind obedience to a system that crushed everyone equally. We were all just gears in a massive, merciless machine of the Empire. Only I was the broken one, torn from the mechanism, disrupting its perfect order. A heavy, suffocating weight rose inside me, like a lump of lead in my chest, as if I hadn't just killed enemies, but reflections of myself, echoes repeating my fate. But there was no time for regret or thought. The air already trembled with alarm, sirens wailed in the distance, and I instinctively knew the next waves of pursuers wouldn't be a mere dozen. The next ones would be hundreds, armed to the teeth, ready to erase me from existence. Sirens roared as if the building itself screamed in pain. Metal walls trembled, elevator shafts filled with the roar of engines, and streams of drones poured downward like a deadly rain. I climbed the stairs, barely keeping balance, feeling the exosuit grow heavier by the second. Overheating reached critical levels, armor melted at the joints, and internal systems screamed of failure. But I kept going, not because I believed in victory, but because I knew that otherwise everything would be for nothing. Each step brought pain, but behind it came something else, a strange calm. I already knew the end was near, that this was my final ascent. On the top floor, everything was different. Silence, no sirens, no noise, only the flicker of neon and the hum of machinery underfoot. The space looked like a temple made of light and glass, with a throne in the center of the hall. The air was thick, as if time flowed slower here. When I entered, he was already waiting, the head of Hydra. Not human, not machine, but something in between, a body of metal, a living face without age. His eyes reflected the entire building, and I realized he was the system itself. Everything I hated, everything millions had died for, all in one body. He said nothing. He didn't have to. I already knew he saw me as nothing more than a malfunction, an error to be erased. Below the building, the legions were already moving. I could feel their steps as vibrations through the floor. Time was running out. I raised my sword, and plasma lit the hall with a blue glow. The leader stepped forward, and in that moment, I understood. He wasn't just an observer. He had once been a warrior like me. His movements were precise, his strikes flawless. We fought, and each swing of the blade unleashed a burst of energy that shattered glass and tore chunks of metal from the walls. The space roared, sparked, crumbled. But with every second I weakened while he, if anything, grew stronger. I knew I couldn't defeat him with ordinary weapons. His body was woven from shadows and technologies immune to bullets or lasers. The exosuit kept warning me, overheating critical, indicators flashing red, system ready for impulse. The final one, the decisive one, the one that would burn me from the inside out, drain every drop of energy, but annihilate everything within the blast radius. I hesitated only for a second, standing still, watching him approach slowly with a predator's grace, a cold smile twisting his face. Bright images flashed through my mind, my wife, her warm eyes, her genuine laughter, then the dark minds, the people long gone, their faces twisted in agony. All of it merged into one breath, one unstoppable purpose pulsing in my veins. I wasn't fighting for myself anymore. I simply couldn't allow it to go on, poisoning worlds. I activated the impulse without hesitation. The world flared into blinding white light, as if someone had torn away the veil of reality, exposing its fragile core. Everything froze in that instant. The air thickened, dust hung suspended, even sound stopped, fading into silence. The exosuit tore apart with a crack. My body became part of the raging flash, and I felt as if I drifted beyond time, floating in eternity. The blast was instant and overwhelming, all stored energy focused on a single point, where he stood in the center of his web. His eyes flickered for the first time, not from pain, but from sudden realization. He knew he had lost. In the next few seconds, his body dissolved into light, evaporating along with the alloy throne, the wires that fed him, and the false eternity he had built for centuries. When everything went quiet, leaving only echoes behind, I no longer felt pain, neither in body nor in soul. Only all-encompassing emptiness and strange lightness, like after release. Somewhere far below, the massive structure was collapsing, walls cracking, systems shutting down one by one, as if the city itself was finally exhaling after centuries of control. People were waking from their trance, control signals cutting off sharply, freeing their minds. I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I knew it instinctively. Everything had started over, from a clean slate. My heart stopped at that moment, but with it, Hydra died too. That monstrous network. And somewhere among the ruins and flickering neon, the first truly free morning was rising, painted in hope. The click was barely audible, but to me, it sounded like thunder. The exoskeleton exploded into motion, twisting air, light, and time into a single blinding vortex. I felt my body stop responding, muscles burning, bones straining, but my mind had never been clearer. A single moment stretched into eternity. I saw every shard of light, every spark, every droplet of molten metal suspended around me. Everything inside me compressed and tore apart at once, but I no longer thought about pain. The only thought left was that no one would ever again use people as expendable tools, that thousands, millions of trapped breaths, once sealed in steel and fear, could finally be free. Right after the click, I saw him, the head of the corporation, standing too close to survive. His body instantly gave in to the force of the blast. He staggered, eyes widening in shock, his face twisting in a mix of terror and silent realization. In that instant, it felt like the building, the city, and reality itself held their breath. He went down, and I watched his knees hit the floor, his trembling hands failing to keep control. I wasn't just a witness to his fear. I had become part of the moment that changed everything. Death was inevitable, and it reached him within seconds. When my energy finally ran out, my body stopped feeling anything. Darkness in my eyes, silence in my head. I knew that all I carried now were memory and consequence. Yet even in that fading, there was symbolism. My final surge hadn't destroyed me. It had shattered the chain that bound millions. I no longer existed, but those whose lives were tied to my choice could now breathe without code, without control, without fear. The death of one became the salvation of all the rest, a strange, cold relief that needed no words. The last thing I felt was an odd lightness, as if gravity and fear had finally let me go. The building was collapsing, systems shutting down, and even if no one saw it, the signal of freedom began spreading instantly. People below started to move differently, no longer afraid, unaware yet of what had happened above. I wasn't there to witness their first breaths or cries of joy, but in the instant life left me, I understood. It had all been worth it. One fallen soldier had broken the chains, and that moment, though it ended my existence, forever changed the future of humanity. When the light died in the hall and the last spark of energy faded, the world began to change. The system that had kept millions under control started to crack and fall apart. Algorithms that had suppressed free will for centuries glitched, databases lost synchronization, and the chains linking minds slowly disintegrated. Across countless planets, people felt, for the first time in centuries, that they could breathe on their own, without forced emotions, without signals of obedience. They stepped out of their capsules, closed their eyes, and the world around them felt both alien and familiar, as if for the first time. In that chaos, a new freedom was born, formless yet already felt in every heartbeat. Stories of the fallen legionnaire spread faster than light. His name became a legend, a symbol of rebellion against the machines and the dead clans that had ruled for centuries. People recorded his feat in networks, shared it through neuroimplants, used it as code markers to exchange information. Anyone who received data about his mission understood one thing: freedom is possible if you dare. He became proof that a single person, even after losing everything, could change the system if they chose to act. His name turned into a password, a symbol of hope and inspiration for all who had once believed in chains and obedience. The galaxy gradually came alive in a new way. Planets that had once been dominated by mines and forced labor began to be settled by people who, for the first time in centuries, could choose how to live and love. Cameras disappeared from cities, drones lost their purpose. Corporations once mighty and omniscient collapsed under the weight of their own utopia. People opened their eyes to a reality they had never seen and realized the world was vast, complex, and dangerous. But now, it belonged to them. Every new planet, every star in their sky, every breath of air became a symbol that freedom is not a gift, but a conquest. The hero's death was not the end. It became the beginning of a new era. His sacrifice transformed into the rebirth of the world. Systems fell, chains broke, fear gave way to determination. People no longer feared living, and every step toward the light was a step he had made for them. In songs, data networks, and memories, he remained with them, a reminder that even one person can change the course of history. The world, born from the ruins of the old empire, now breathed freedom. And this freedom would never again be subject to those who believed immortal control mattered more than life.